Okay.
Okay, we will start with the first question, which is how old were you when the attacks took place?
39.
Okay. Um, where and what were you doing? Were you working, going to school, etc.?
I was working, I was on the airplane
Okay.
because
Um,
flight attendant. So I was working on the airplane.
all right. So, how did you first find out about the attacks?
We didn't know about the attacks when they happened because we were in the air shortly, just a little bit behind the airplane that crashed in Shanksville.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know about it. Back then, we didn't have cell phones the way we have cell phones today. And the only reason we knew was because there was a pilot who was riding the jump seats in the flight deck. And I was the lead flight attendant that day, so I was the closest to the door. And we had landed in Charlotte, and they made us go to the field, not near the airport. And when we went to the field, the pilot who was riding the jump seat, which was a pilot, not part of our
Are you okay? What happened?
I didn't do anything. It just
Hung up. All right, my bad. So sorry, you were saying.
so the pilot on the jump seat was not part of the core crew,
Mm-hmm.
and he had a cell phone and was talking to his wife right after we landed, and his wife said that she was watching on CNN that something terrible had happened and that an aircraft had, we originally thought that it had crashed by accident into the World Trade Center, but that was only the first aircraft.
Yeah.
Um,
So
the
that was in the morning, right?
Yeah, it was in the morning. We were in Charlotte,
Okay.
and he was just commuting to go to work. So then, from what I remember, is the captain told us that although he didn't know what was going on from the behavior of everything around us, like that there was no ground movement and that they had made all the airplanes go to the field, which is the grassy area of the airport. Um, he thought that somewhere we were at war, that there was an act of war somewhere, because it just so happened that our pilot had served in the military, and so I guess there were certain things that he recognized.
Okay. Um. So when did you know it was a terrorist attack?
Not until it was probably at least 2 hours later that we just waited on the field, and then maybe even more than that. I'm thinking probably 4 hours, and it was not because we were isolated. We really didn't have any idea, so we weren't looking at the images on television. And so once they gave us permission to go to the airport, which was the Charlotte Douglas International Airport, which is one of our major hubs. I was in the front of the airplane and to the jetway at the actual airport, and I opened the door. And when I opened the door, there was the agent who opened the door. She was just crying profusely, and there was the FAA and the police, because back then we didn't have sky marshals, but the police and the FAA came on board, and they immediately told us that there was a terrorist attack, and they let the passengers deplane very carefully as they were watching everybody, but they detained the crew because they wanted to question us. So we were detained right after it happened. And I was 5.5 months pregnant with your sister.
Okay. Um. What emotions and thoughts were going through your mind as you learned about the attacks?
N- there was really nothing to really think about because it was just such a horrendous thing that um, the surprise of it really didn't have the time to sink in. Plus, we were really worried about getting our passengers safely um, off the airplane and into the airport where they could evacuate through a normal door if necessary. But we really didn't have time to think. It was not until that evening. I was stranded for days, and I was lucky to have a fellow friend, a flight attendant, who took me in because the whole kind of fell apart. So the whole operation fell apart. Scheduling didn't know where anybody was anymore. The systems were overwhelmed. There were no cars to drive to get home. There were no trains, no airplanes, no buses. Everything was sold out. So basically, you were stuck wherever you were.
Okay. Were you afraid for your safety or the safety of your family, and what actions did you take?
Like in terms of the future at work or in terms of um,
Like, did you call dad to make sure, they were okay? Did you, things like that. Did you make sure that they were, like, inside and not near anywhere? Did you do anything with Victoria?
um, I did not know I did not know what to do at the time because there was no such thing in the past. But some of the things I did was I remained very vigilant at all times in public places. I wouldn't let Victoria watch any of the um, coverage from 9/11 on any of the news because she was too young to understand that although this had happened to in my field where I work, it most likely would not happen to me, even though it could happen to me.
Mhm.
So because she was too little and she couldn't really understand, and I just followed um, the people who were experts with this,
Mhm.
and to just shield her for as long as I could until she was old enough to understand and process the information in a more mature way.
Mhm. Um, so, what would you say is your most vivid memory of that day?
When I got when I got to my friend's house that night and the following day. Well, that day is just when I finally got to go and get away from it because it was impossible. There
Yeah.
were hundreds of people trying to get out of the airport, hundreds. So it was just a big shoving, pushing match, and the people tried to take our van that the hotel had sent to us to get us out of the airport because we had been up since 4 a.m. and I was pregnant, and they sent the van, but the passengers climbed onto the van and wouldn't let us get on the van. So it wasn't until the captain went on the van and kicked everybody off and told them that the van was for the crew and that there was a very pregnant flight attendant, which was me, who needed to get to a hotel and rest, that they actually got off the van.
Mhm.
So, and
Um, so, did you know anyone who were personally impacted by the attacks, and what happened to them?
personally, we were all affected by the attack.
No, I mean, like, did anyone that you know, like,
I
lose a
don't,
loved one?
I don't know anybody who died personally.
Okay. Do you believe that the nation is safer today as a result of the changes that took place after 9/11?
Yes and no. I mean, bad guys are always going to try and outsmart them and stop them from doing something. They'll find another way. Nothing is foolproof. Airline personnel had been saying for a very long time how easy it could have been to perhaps not use an aircraft in this way, but how much security was not a big deal. And we always knew in the back of our minds that security was way too lax. We had never thought that anybody would do something that horrible. But many times, the flight crews, because of events that have happened in the past, are scrutinized in ways that many people don't realize and don't know. And I think maybe they should be looking at other issues and not just solely at flight crews. None of the flight crews did this.
Mm-hmm.
And if there have been things, however, not in the situation. So I don't know if it's better. I think it's just different. I think that 9/11 opened the eyes to many things that weren't there in the past. I'm grateful for air marshals as I work closely with them. And this was something that we didn't have in the past. And so in terms of the skies being safer, they can be, but, you know, bad guys always wait, you know, for the good guys to let the guard down. And, you know, who's to say? I mean, I really don't know.
All right.
Yes, and many
Right.
things, yes. Some other things, no.
Okay. My next question is, do you think that terrorism can ever be defeated, and why or why not? If, more specifically, can it ever be truly prevented?
No.
No. Okay. Um,
I don't know why not, because there's always a bad guy, you know. They'll just continue to terrorize people in different ways, but, you know, it'll always be the fight good against bad and, you know, good against evil. I don't think so.
so you think there's no foolproof way to prevent these things?
I think there's a way to curb it, but, you know, you'll always be faced with that challenge.
Has 9/11 changed you and shaped you into who you are today, and how so?
Yes, it's changed my whole work. Um, Everything. I mean, when I became a flight attendant, I did not train for terrorism. I didn't train for things that we call the current threat. I never trained for these things. Now I'm required to train. I'm required for self-defense. Um, I'm required to do a lot of things that weren't in place prior to 11. It kind of has split my job as before or after 9/11. So it has made me a better flight attendant. I mean, most people think we just deliver drinks, but, you know, nobody ever trained me to deliver a drink to anybody. And that is not the reason why you have a flight crew there for you. We're there for your safety, which is number one, whether it be on the airplane safety or just, you know, keeping the aircraft safe per se. And yes, I am better, unfortunately.
Um, the second to last question is, do you believe that the government should be able to listen to phone calls or read private emails, so, you know, breach privacy in order to fight terrorism?
Yes,
Without a
next,
doubt.
got it
Okay.
out. Yes.
And how effective do you think the TSA has been in preventing terrorist attacks from happening? Do you think an attack like this will ever happen again? of this scale would happen again?
I can't see into the future. I think if somebody wanted to take an aircraft or another means of transportation, like a train or a ship, there's plenty of cargo containers where you can put explosives into. Unfortunately, I don't know if it could be in the form of the airplane. I think they've made it much more difficult, but it's not impossible. We've had we have had bomb threats after 9/11, like the shoe bomber or the guy who put the bomb in his underwear and then exploded. And then there was another one, I think, where he had tried to put a bomb in the lavatory and so forth. And that was all post 9/11. So they will keep trying to find ways to outsmart the security that is now in place. And it's not to say that sooner or later they won't find, which I hope they don't, find a way to get past the measures that we currently have in place. So, I mean, I don't know. I hope not. I certainly hope it's not on my airplane. But, it was never the airplanes that did wrong. So it really isn't a thing about the airplane. It's how bad the people were that day
And
who participated.
just a quick extra question. So, do you work for American Airlines, which is it used to be U.S. Airways? And if I'm correct, one of the planes that crashed into the Twin Towers was of U.S. Airways, correct?
It was never U.S. Airways, and I was not hired U.S. Airways. I was U.S. Air 22 years ago. So I've been in the industry for 22 years. U.S. Air then morphed into U.S. Airways, and then they merged with America West. And after that, they had this deal with American Airlines. And it is the American Airlines aircraft and United that were involved in 9/11. But at the time of 9/11, I was not American Airlines. I was U.S. Airways.
Okay, so you didn't know anyone on that flight? You didn't have any coworkers that you knew? Okay. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it a lot.
Okay, bye.
Bye.